Thanks for being here. We appreciate your time. Today, we're here to discuss guided self-assessment with our research advisory group, a wide range of voices looking at this common topic. First of all, let's define the term and understand what we're here to talk about. Michael, can you help us understand what is guided self-assessment?
Sure, Steve. First, I'll just mention assessment is where you'd measure an individual and you'd see where they fall in a particular framework. Maybe you'd be interested in that because it would help them, or it would help you compare them to other individuals. Guided self-assessment refers to teaching people about the model you're working with. A very collaborative process. In this case, you guys are using RIASEC, and so you're teaching students about a well-established career development model, but it's guided. You're asking them to reflect on who they are and how they fit into the framework. And so it's unique that way because it really taps into their experience of themselves. So instead of saying, this is who you are, you're saying, who do you think you are in relation to this framework? That's guided self assessment.
Beautiful. So that frames the topic. Ed, can you talk to a little bit about what that looks like in the field and some of the work that you're out there doing?
Sure, Steve. In the field, we are stepping into classrooms. Typically, it's a cold start. We walk into a classroom. We may have tools like the ones that you see behind us, and we're inviting students to see themselves in the language that we're going to describe. We explore all the themes. We invite students to understand the themes. We tell stories. We use instructional practices, and we invite dialogue, dialogic conversations, turn-in talks, all calls. Sometimes we have students come up to the poster and identify which themes are most like you and why. And of course, students learn all the themes. And therefore, many times, school sites want us to talk to families about this method of guided self-assessment and take the families through this process for themselves. And so I thought this anecdote would be interesting as we're talking about this work, because I recently was working with families. And after we experienced the guided self-assessment process, we went to classrooms to see student work. And in one of those classrooms, we happened to see a paper and pencil version of the RIASEC assessment on a student's desk. And a parent looked down and then looked at me and said, I'm a little concerned because I've noticed that my student received a 0 in social. And what does that mean? And of course, we proceeded to have a conversation, and I proceeded to bring that parent to ease with understanding around our methods and what they had experienced versus the assessment. But I think it brings to the table the difference between guided self-assessment, the work that we do in classrooms, and perhaps a quantitative assessment, a measure such as the one that parent was seeing in that moment, and that emotion that that parent was feeling in that moment for their child.
Thank you, Ed. That kind of frames the tension point, right, between self-assessment and external or outside assessment. Emily, you have deep expertise in Holland and the history of this work, the use of RIASEC, and career decision making in general. Can you talk to us about your perspective on this idea of guided self-assessment?
I'd be happy to, Steve. First, I want to start with defining a couple of terms that Holland, the developer of the RIASEC model, often used. Expressed versus assessed interest. So Holland, as the developer of RIASEC, was a developer of objective assessments of interest in other things, right? And believed in that work, and I use them as well. But he consistently talked about the power of expressed interest, what someone says they are interested in. And that's very important to consider, that even within this model and idea, and I'm a psychologist, we're a lot of our field is guided by psychological assessment and what can we understand about people and groups, and inform our research through these objective assessments. But when we are talking about people, when we are talking about children in a classroom, asking them to express their interest has some particular value. And I see that when I contrast it with some of the issues I see when I myself have given people objective interest inventories. I work really hard to be that collaborative psychologist that helps them respond to the results of the inventory. But a couple of things I regularly see are, one, people just somehow seem to see magic in these objective paper, pencil, or computer inventories. Like somehow there's some magical knowledge behind them that can reveal something they could not reveal themselves, when actually it's just asking them questions about themselves that they are answering. And so it's hard to get past that magic sometimes, and allow for them to allow themselves to be collaborative, and thinking they can collaborate with this magical tool is a hurdle. And people also tend to fall. There's this pitfall of should this inventory told me I should be this, and my interests are this, so therefore I should do this, and it's set, and the conversation's over because I've gotten the magical answer. With guided self-assessment, you skip that. You start with, in this case, children learning about a model, manipulating it themselves in their minds, making a decision initially themselves about where they think they fit, getting to recreate that over time as conversations continue and new information comes in, and they can continue to express their interests and likely feel much freer to do so when there's not this magical entity controlling it.
Thank you for that clarification and understanding of some of the dynamics at play with self-assessment, guided assessment, kind of external voices. Dave, how do you think about this issue, and what is your take?
Well, my initial take is I'm going to build on everything Emily just said, because we all encounter this in the career development business, that magical idea of, and this objective sort of labeling of who I am. And, sometimes that can be a very useful starting point. And in fact, whether it's guided self-assessment or it's the label that's some objective test, as you folks have been doing so well, it starts creating a common language, RIASEC, and people know what it means, et cetera. But ultimately, developmentally, what we're trying to help students do, and all people do, is get better and better at that critical career development skill of self-awareness, self-reflection, or two skills, and understanding themselves. But what happens is that becomes much more nuanced when you're 20, 24, and as you get older, because those big, huge career things that you've been thinking about, they sort of settle down, right? And now it's much more nuanced about what kind of things do I want to do in my workplace, and how can I control that? And further, I am a firm believer that every decision we make is a career decision. It's either taking us to where we want to go or not. And if we're intentional, all our decisions, from what we ate for breakfast this morning to bigger job issues, are career decisions. And those decisions are better made when somebody has a skill to actually clarify, what did I like about this, and why didn't I like it last time? And they don't have to then worry about the labels, because it's much more contextual, much more specific. I'll stop there.
Beautiful. Thank you for those insights. I appreciate it. And Christina, your expertise in quantifying, qualifying, understanding, tracking, making sense of the data, can you help us unpack this concept and usefulness of guided self-assessment?
Well, if that is what we've been doing in schools for 2 years, and we've been measuring impact both long-term and now more recently short-term, and if we are getting the evidence that well-being increases when they are doing this guided assessment of their self-perceived aptitudes. So we use the RIASEC as a model to initiate it, but we are seeing that well-being really correlates significantly with these moments. And reflection is the behavior that increases in line with the frequency of these moments. So the more career conversations that involve this type of assessment they have, the higher their reflection scores in line with their well-being. And when we looked at locus of control, which is basically a sense of agency over what happens in their educational journeys, that was increasing too, also in correlation with reflection and well-being. So there is something in there. And so we decided to ask students now at the end of sessions where they have self-guided assessments of their ISAC themes, how confident they were of their what they thought what they were good at. So in other words, strengths. They said they were either confident or very confident to an 84% ratio. And we're talking about elementary school students. So this is already making changes in a very early age. So it is important to kind of continue researching not just the short-term impact on their sense of agency and confidence in identifying their attributes, but also a longer-term one. And ideally we would compare with students who do a more sort of passive kind of assessment where they're not so equipped as Dave was leaning towards, equipped to actually do it by themselves without having to stick to labels. So ideally we would have that comparison with a group that wouldn't do it or would do it in a different way. But even better if we would get to see the long-term impact and how this actually may impact job satisfaction, because maybe, but just maybe, they would have more confidence in continuing the habit of reflecting because they are equipped to do so. And if you allow me the analogy, I think of it as being given one of those thick Michelin maps that to your hands to say, you know, by the end of the day, you need to get to point B, and you don't have a phone or a sat nav. You just look at the roads and you look at the landscape and what's around you, and you make decisions. But ultimately, you have a map and you can get there. Comparative to being given a sat nav and it telling you where to go and how to do it. So you don't even think you are a passive driver. And in the end, you didn't get the skills of navigating. So this is basically navigating self and how to express it. So I think there's a lot of interesting evidence we are getting from our research. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how this changes not just career development behaviors, but also how they enjoy education and their day in school.
Beautiful. Thank you, Christina. And Michael, you opened this conversation. You helped frame the concept here of guided self-assessment. So I want to hand it back to you to close us off with big ideas or something that you'd like to echo or add that we maybe haven't discovered yet.
I think, Steve, I'll just focus on what Christina was saying there about the well-being outcomes. And I think the map metaphor actually really fits. Career concerns are among the most worrisome concerns that all people face, but particularly students, kids worry about their futures. Where am I going? And what am I going to do? What's going to happen with me? Who am I going to take with me? All of those are career concerns. And this self-assessment piece that we're talking about is really an intervention, and the intervention produces increased coping capacity. And so by that lens, it's definitely a mental health intervention as well. And the markers Christine is talking about are all evidence that there's a movement towards positive well-being, towards positive mental health outcomes. Then if you add to that all of the things that the intervention's doing around helping students be more aware of interests and values and their particular skills, all of those add up to authentic expression and living, making decisions that leading to more meaningful expression of themselves. So all of it supports mental health and well-being.
Well, beautiful. Thank you all for your insights and your time. Thank you for sharing your expertise as we continue to drive kids to conversations around careers and opportunities and build hope and agency. We thank you all. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.